Minister, the bust from the Celtic Tiger era should have taught many of us the importance of budgeting and living within our means. This applies to the management of our national finances also. I said on Budget Day I felt I needed to stand up and question the wisdom of breaking the fiscal rules in developing the 2024 budget, particularly when the pre-windfall corporation tax means in real terms we are actually operating a deficit. We adopted fiscal rules precisely to try to avoid the mistakes of the past, to try to avoid the pain and trauma of boom and bust. I have patchy memory of the mistakes of the late 1970s, but I certainly remember the pain of the 1980s. I, like many, was possibly irrationally exuberant during the noughties, but seeing the horror of the global financial crisis cutting our country to ribbons post the Celtic Tiger, the austerity programme and the bailout, we should never ever risk going back to those times again. The question is, Minister, have we learned that economic indiscipline in the good times causes deep social and cultural carnage when times go bad? I believe no finance minister should sit down to write their budget without first reading Jean-Claude Trichet's letters to Brian Lenihan. They are sobering in the extreme and show the kindness of neighbours only extends so far, even from our European neighbours. Of course, we need to address the pressures to deliver on health, housing, infrastructure and climate obligations. But every department and every part of government is getting, as usual, a bump in this budget, as they always do. We are giving out, yet again, participation awards without any connection to performance, any connection to reform, any connection to greater financial probity and transparency. We speak of delivery, but the people cannot see it. We could redeploy areas of government and our public service that no longer make sense in the context of the full employment we now have, but we choose not to. We speak to pressing needs, but we seem unable to understand the conditions that precipitate them. Indeed, we look to advisory bodies that we have endorsed for macro and microeconomic advice. We have the Irish Government Economic and Evaluation Service, which does some good work but has no political cover. We then went and lauded the fact we developed IFAC, the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council, but then government chooses to completely ignore that advice. We have shown no commitment to delivery of real spending reform, Minister, no root and branch spending reviews that are commonplace in commercial business, but they are not here in commercial politics. We never clean out the house, never do the serious reforms needed, and we continue to fail to meet the public's demand for better services and greater efficiencies. We can look at the Children's Hospital for a textbook version of dysfunctional procurement on a stratospheric level. Ceausescu-esque on every level, including the gigantic failure of procurement and oversight and governance. Responsibility for such dysfunction is never called out. The root and branch reform of our civil and public service administration remains a job for someone else to do at a later stage, when those with responsibility now are in the clear. We can look to the slow strangulation of Sláinte care, forgetting that the Irish people were promised universal health care in 2011. In 2017, Sláinte care was presented as a genuine all-party effort to renew and reform healthcare in Ireland. But even before the pandemic, it looked like it was dumped in favour of trophy, grandiose and to the most delusional trophy projects. We have pleased the Dublin and Cork health industries by pressing ahead while other regions have been visibly left to starve. 6 years later, the only answer to our woeful health system is to throw money at it, or else turn off the tap, creating further system failure, further dysfunction. We have the data to tell us where we spent money. We never seem to have it to tell us where we have wasted it. In fact, we have no reasonable data to base decisions on. And for many in the departments, it appears to me, Minister, they like it like that. In terms of throwing money about, Budget 2024 throws more money at problems than we have spent a decade throwing money at, without any progress. If we cannot do a sustainable budget when we have surpluses in full employment, well then when, Minister? The time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining. And despite all the headwinds and the mixed signals, the government coffers are full, and that means the sun is shining now. But of course, Minister, as you well know, I can say this. I can emphasise the importance of keeping government spending under control, because I am from Waterford, where we have to practice that at every juncture. The South East and the Midlands and the border region is also not fully at this national spending frenzy. Regional GDP continues to fall behind in these regions, and indeed I heard Deputy Harkin this morning at Leaders' Questions outlining her sincere concerns at the regional disparity affected in the North West and border areas. There is a massive deficit in high-quality new knowledge economy jobs in these regions, usually the IDA-supported jobs. And the kicker is that government refuses to undertake transformative capital projects in these regions, Minister. And worse, it refuses to even allow transformative projects to be developed, frustrating every step of the tortuous process, meanwhile dancing to their own favourite projects through the management consultants and others. So like the Celtic Tiger before, which half of the country did not fully participate in, the South East certainly will get the hangover, but we will not be at the party. I agree, Minister, with the budget that many of the cost of living measures are needed. I will likely struggle to support the capital spending plans if they follow the previous direction of travel and the clear discrimination evident against regional priorities outside of the East and South West. I have raised these issues with government privately and on the floor of this House repeatedly. Projects are concentrated in Dublin and Cork while the rest of the country starve. The data presented on the spending plans are an insult to our democracy, to the credibility of this House. In 2016, the OECD rebuked Ireland and this Parliament for our lack of parliamentary oversight on spending. And despite the innovation of the Committee on Budgetary Oversight and the Parliamentary Budget Office, basic data on capital spending is not reported to this House. The social media pages of ministers are often more informative than their statements to this House. Literally billions are dropped into departments and onwards into a bunch of quangos, like the HSE and the HEA, and they all operate as black holes. The money is never seen, never heard from again. So, Minister, I will wait and see what improvement, if any, can be evidenced in terms of fairness and transparency on capital spending and the NDP review before I decide how to vote on the finance bill. As I said already, I cannot agree that the 2024 budget was the budget the country needed. I believe, and I have said it breaks the fiscal rules and certainly the spirit of fiduciary responsibility, in my opinion. I believe it harms our credibility as a country. I believe it will likely feed inflation. And who knows what is around the corner for a small, open economy like ours as the corporation tax receipts decline. We used to blame stamp duty as the reason we lost our way in the Celtic Tiger. Will windfall corporation tax become the future explainer of how a country and a government failed to learn its lessons?